Joining us here in Johannesburg is Rob Stretch of Ernst Young and Professor Jackie Aarendse from the University of the Witwatersrand in Cape Town. We're joined by Mike Teuchert from Grand Thornton. And of course, thank you very much to all of you for joining us. I'm sure quite an exciting day from a tax perspective, at least. And let's kick off with that. Rob, let's start off with you and your thoughts on the overall comments that were given by Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. No real surprises, though.
Yeah, I don't think there were any real surprises. I think everyone knew that it was going to be a sort of holding budget, given the state of the economy that we're still trying to recover from 2008. I think the surprises were perhaps the amount that he's giving back in personal income tax, the 8 billion. But I do suspect that he's taking back 10 out of the other pocket through the other taxes. And
we will be delving into that in a little while. Jackie, what stood out for you in the budget today?
Well, again, I think the focus on individuals, I think some of us were a little worried that there could be increases in taxes, but I think towards, as we got closer to the budget, that fear probably dissipated. But I think it's still a reality that we could still see real increases in tax payments coming through because of the various pulling back on deductions and allowances and so on for individuals. I think the other thing was the comment on small business, the focus on the need to encourage small business, but perhaps a little disappointing that there wasn't more done for small business.
It's interesting because it is something that the finance ministers over the past few years have been focusing on, but nothing really materializes down the line. Mike, a very good evening to you. Let's start off with your general sentiments and also just focusing on the fact that revenue for the 2010-2011 financial period higher than anticipated. I mean, coming in at 12.3% to the good.
Yeah, look, I think that is quite encouraging, and it's mainly arisen out of individuals and the VAT take. Overall, yeah, I think a lot of very similar things as in past budgets. Limited relief to individuals, a little bit of increases in the sin taxes, but then I think, as Rob rightly pointed out, I think there's a lot of other areas where he's more likely going to be taken away from us. And again, also, I'd like to reiterate what Jackie said. I don't think he's done enough for small businesses. We've had relief for small businesses, but it hasn't really materially changed since it was introduced.
Rob, let's now delve into some of the numbers that we've seen, and I mentioned the 12.3% higher revenue front than what we saw last year, 672 billion rand. Interesting to note, though, that corporate income tax revenue has remained below projections, and it's interesting because we were expecting something of this kind, and perhaps the corporate fund to be impacted by tax, but no real news there either.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think the increased collections have all come through your PAYE, your individuals, and through your VAT. And I think with corporates, there generally is a lag of the others. So I think you'll probably find that as far as corporates go, it will start coming through in the next year or two, that there'll be increase. But yeah, one can look at the results presented by corporates and that sort of thing. There's many sectors in the corporate field that are actually struggling, from where they were 2 or 3 years ago.
And this is why, as you mentioned as well, Jackie, I mean, we need to have quite a big focus on the small to medium-sized enterprises. And it seems that one thing that the minister was really focusing on is job creation, and perhaps that's where the incentives could perhaps come in.
Well, yes, there was mention of this 5 billion fund, especially for the youth, and obviously would relate to job creation as well. But no real detail on how that's going to be implemented. And I think that could be something that could be quite useful, but we need detail on whether it will actually come about and how it will come about.
Well, it's interesting because the minister did say after consultations.
Yes,
and
exactly,
it's interesting that a job fund and something focusing on the youth needs to be, focused on from a consultative perspective. Mike, your view on that, and do you think that perhaps the minister is focusing on what Labour is going to say with regards to this fund?
Yeah, look, I think just from a tax perspective, an interesting concept that they're producing is that tax credits will be granted in respect of this Labour fund. Yes, while I think it's a great idea, this new concept of tax credits is something that's going to be interesting how they're going to manage it. I think from Labour's perspective, or from the country's perspective, it is something that we really do need to be able to offer our young and unemployed people some employment opportunities. Otherwise, yeah, we're going to run into problems. So I think the idea is correct. I think, again, the devil's going to be in the detail and how they're going to implement it.
Rob, let's now take a look at the personal income tax scenario. You mentioned up at the top that it's great we're getting 8 billion rand back in our pockets, and perhaps you alluded to us perhaps giving back 10 billion in another breath as well. It is election year. Did you expect such a huge tax relief on the personal income tax front?
I didn't think it would be that big. I always knew that they'd actually give something back, particularly in the lower income brackets, which is, but you know, to the extent of 8 billion, it's quite a lot of money. But if you look at it, the majority of it is in that sort of lesser than 250,000 bracket, which is probably deservedly where it actually needs to go, yeah, given the present state of the economy. I think they're going to take it back in a number of ways. It's going to be a bit of a redistribution, particularly when one looks at some of the proposals for next year in terms of what they're planning on bringing in.
Jackie, what about the retirement aspect and the medical aid scheme aspect as well? Because as we said, 8 billion rand given back to us but taken in other forms, and that perhaps is going to be one of the pain areas.
Well, concerning, I think. This is only going to kick in from 2012, so it's not something that's factored into this 8 billion rand for this year. And it is obviously going to impact on individuals, especially your higher income earners. The pension, there's going to be a cap of 200,000 on the amount of the deduction, and that's after taking all the employer contributions in as fringe benefits. So I think that's going to impact your higher income earners quite substantially, and obviously it could have impact on retirement savings. On the other side, we've got the medical aid, which currently we get the deductions, and there was talk last year that, in fact, a couple of years ago, they started talking about converting that to a credit, and now further talk about that definitely coming in from next year. And there, the credit will be a fixed percentage, so that will be to the benefit of your lower income earners, that would be to the disadvantage of your higher income earners. So these things are concerning for the
again,
people in that.
just increasing the tax pool there. Mike, your sentiments with regards to that, do you think it's going to be positive or negative? And I suppose the market now also has time to start factoring in these changes.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting what they're doing with what they're proposing with retirement funding. I think there's going to be a certain amount of levelling of the playing fields where a deduction will be granted equally to everybody in respect of whether you're in a pension fund or a provident fund. So yeah, I think that is going to have some impact on the industry, and I think it's going to have an impact again on mainly the higher earners. You know, with regard to the 8.1 billion relief that he has granted, I think in the main it's very inflationary. If you do the numbers, it's coming out at 3-4%, which is effectively inflation. But what is also interesting is now decided to grant an additional rebate to those over 75 years old, and which means that the tax threshold for people over 75,000 earning over 75 years of age will be just over 100,000 rand. And if you take a married couple, that's quite a reasonable amount of tax-free income that they will be able to enjoy. And then if you take the interest exemption into account as well, it could be quite substantial.